The sound you hear is not the beginning of a story. It is the sound of an ending. It's the thump of a gut-stringed racket hitting a hard leather ball, a game of tennis played on a dusty court in Rome on the 28th of May in the year of our Lord, 1606. The air is thick with the sweet, cloying scent of jasmine and the metallic tang of unshed blood. 4 men are playing. One of them is named Ranuccio Tomassoni. He is a pimp, a bully, a man who knows his way around a knife fight. The other is Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio. He is the most famous painter in Rome, a genius touched by God and a sinner who walks with the devil. The game is not just a game, it is an argument, a challenge, a slow-burning fuse. A debt is owed, or an insult has been given, or perhaps, as is so often the case, a woman stands between them. The score ceases to matter. The muttering escalates to a shout. A racket is thrown down. In the fading Roman light, steel rasps against steel. There's a frantic dance of blades. It's not an elegant duel of honor, it's a street brawl, grunting, sweating, clumsy. A lunge, a missed parry, a cry of pain, sharp and shockingly high-pitched, and then a different sound, a wet, tearing sound. Ranuccio Tomassoni stumbles backward, his hand flying to his groin, his eyes wide with a surprise that is quickly turning to terror. Blood, shockingly dark, blossoms through his breeches, pouring down his leg, pooling in the dust. The femoral artery has been severed. For a moment, there is silence. The absolute deafening silence that follows an act that can never be undone. Then, panic, shouts, the frantic scuffle of feet as Tomassoni's companions rush to his side. But Caravaggio is already moving. He is wounded himself, a cut on his head, but the adrenaline masks the pain. He turns and runs. He melts into the labyrinth of Rome's ancient alleyways, his footsteps echoing against the crumbling stone. The painter of light disappears into the darkness. He is no longer just a brawler, a hellraiser, a difficult genius. He is a murderer, and he will be hunted. But to understand the man running through the shadows, you have to understand the world that made him. A world of plague and prayer, of sacred beauty and savage violence. To understand the painter, you must first go back to the beginning. Our story begins not in Rome, but in Milan, on the 29th of September, 1571. A boy is born and christened Michelangelo Merisi. His father, Fermo Merisi, is an architect, a master of stone and decoration for the local nobility. His mother, Lucia Aratori, comes from a family with property and connections. It is a respectable start. But the world this child is born into is anything but stable. Imagine the air in northern Italy in the late 16th century. It is thick with the smoke of incense and the miasma of disease. The Catholic Church, wounded by the Protestant Reformation, is fighting back with a new fervour. This is the Counter-Reformation, a movement that demands an art not of distant, idealised beauty, but of raw, human emotion. An art that can make a peasant weep, that can show the saints not as porcelain dolls in the sky, but as men and women of flesh and blood, with dirt under their fingernails and doubt in their hearts. And then there is the plague. In 1576, it descends upon Milan like a shroud. The family flees to the small, nearby town that will give the boy his name, Caravaggio. But the plague is relentless. It finds them. Little Michelangelo is only 6 years old when he watches it take his father, then his grandfather, then his uncle. Death is not an abstract concept for this child. It is the empty chair at the table. It is the hurried, fearful whispers in the street. It is a stench on the air. This early education in mortality will stain every canvas he ever touches. By 13, he is an orphan, his mother having succumbed to the hardships that followed. He is sent back to Milan, apprenticed to a painter named Simone Peterzano. Peterzano was a student of the great Venetian master, Titian, and from him, Caravaggio learns a crucial lesson. The Venetians prized colour and atmosphere, and they had a radical practice. They often painted directly onto the canvas, working from live models, capturing the immediacy of the moment. No endless, perfect drawings, just the eye, the hand, and the living, breathing person in front of you. This, for Caravaggio, is a revelation. Art is not about copying the smooth, serene perfection of the past. It is about capturing the flawed, messy, undeniable truth of the present. The Lombard tradition he grew up in already valued a certain rustic realism, a simple, direct piety. The combination of Lombard earthiness and Venetian immediacy creates a perfect storm within him. 4 years he spends with Pitazano. Then he vanishes from the record. Police documents from later years hint at what happened. Brawls, fights with the city guard. A report mentions he quarrelled with a man. Knowing Caravaggio, quarrelled likely involved a sword. He leaves Milan in a hurry. He is young, fiercely talented, haunted by death, and filled with a restless, violent energy. There is only one place in the world for a man like that. A place big enough and chaotic enough to hold him. Rome. He arrives around 1592, a 21-year-old with nothing but the clothes on his back and a fire in his belly. Imagine his first sight of the city. Rome is not the sanitized marble museum we see today. It is a sprawling, teeming, glorious and filthy metropolis. It is the heart of Christendom, choked with pilgrims seeking salvation, their rosaries clicking as they navigate streets slick with mud and refuse. It is a city of staggering wealth, of cardinals in crimson silk living in sprawling palaces. And it is a city of desperate poverty, of beggars with running sores, of soldiers and mercenaries from every corner of Europe, of thousands of prostitutes who line the banks of the Tiber. It is a city of sacred processions and back-alley knife fights, of soaring church domes and squalid windowless taverns. It is a city of God and a city of men, and the line between the two is hopelessly blurred. It is, in other words, a city made for Caravaggio. His first years are a struggle for survival. He is penniless, often ill. He finds work in the massive factory-like workshop of Giuseppe Cesari, the Cavaliere d'Arpino, a favourite painter of the Pope. Cesari is a painter of fashionable, frothy frescoes. He recognises Caravaggio's talent, but doesn't know what to do with it. He sets the young man to a soul-crushing task, painting endless, repetitive still lifes of fruit and flowers to be added into larger compositions. Even here, Caravaggio's genius cannot be suppressed. His fruit is not idealized. It has blemishes. A leaf is withered. A grape is starting to rot. He paints the truth. During a bout of illness, possibly malaria, he is hospitalized. Using a mirror, he paints himself. The resulting work, known as the Sick Bacchus, is a raw, unflinching self-portrait. He is not a god, but a young man with greenish-yellow skin, his lips pale, his eyes weary. It is a declaration of intent. I will paint what is real, even if it is ugly, even if it is myself. He cannot stay in the workshop. His spirit is too restless, too proud. He leaves, and for a time he is adrift again. But he is not alone. He finds his tribe in the taverns and on the streets. He befriends the Sicilian painter Mario Minetti, a beautiful young man who will become his model and perhaps his lover. He falls in with Onorio Longhi, an architect from a family of brawlers, a man who, like Caravaggio, is more comfortable with a sword in his hand than a prayer book. This is the crew with whom he prowls the Roman nights. They drink cheap wine, they gamble, they fight. Police records from these years begin to fill with his name. August 1597, disturbing the peace. May 1598, carrying a sword without a license. He is arrested for throwing a plate of artichokes at a waiter because he believes they aren't cooked properly. He insults guards, gets into shouting matches, and trades blows over cards. And all the while, he paints. He sets up his own studio, which is little more than a rented room with a high window. He paints what he sees on the streets. He paints his friend Mario dressed as a musician, lute in hand. his expression languid and sensual. He paints a young boy bitten by a lizard that leaps from a bowl of fruit, his face a perfect mask of pained surprise, and he paints scenes taken directly from the Roman underworld he now inhabits. In The Fortune Teller, a foppish young man has his palm read by a beautiful gypsy girl. As she looks sweetly into his eyes, her fingers slyly slip a ring from his finger. In The Card Sharps, an innocent, wealthy boy is cheated at cards by two hustlers. We, the viewer, are in on the con. We see the older cheat peering over the boy's shoulder, signaling to his young accomplice, who pulls a hidden card from behind his back. These are not grand religious epics. They are something new. They are windows into real life, filled with psychological tension, drama, and a gritty naturalism nobody has ever seen before. They are paintings that smell of the tavern, that capture the split second of deception. And one day, a man of immense power and taste walks past a dealer's shop and sees them. His name is Cardinal Francesco Maria del Monte. He is a diplomat, a scientist, a sophisticated patron of the arts, and a man with an eye for genius. He doesn't just buy the paintings, he finds the painter, and he invites Caravaggio to live with him in his grand residence, the Palazzo Madama. Just like that, the street urchin has a home. He is given food, a workshop, and a powerful protector. For the first time, he has security. But the cardinal gets something in return. He gets to watch a revolutionary at work. In the cardinal's household, surrounded by musical instruments, scientific curiosities, and a circle of refined, intelligent men, Caravaggio's art explodes. He paints a terrifying Medusa, her face frozen in a silent scream, snakes writhing from her head on a ceremonial shield. He paints beautiful, androgynous boys as saints and angels. But Del Monte knows this talent is too big for private rooms. It belongs on the public stage. It belongs in the churches, where it can shock and move the masses. Through his influence, he secures for his volatile protégé the commission that will change everything. A chance to paint two massive canvases for the Contarelli Chapel in the Church of San Luigi dei Francesi, the French national church in Rome. The street fighter, the tavern brawler, the painter of card sharps and fortune tellers, is about to walk into the sacred heart of Rome and set it on fire. Imagine you are a pilgrim in Rome in the Jubilee year of 1600. You are weary from your journey. You step out of the blinding sun and into the cool, dark cavern of the Church of San Luigi dei Francesi. Your eyes adjust slowly to the gloom. The air is heavy with the scent of old stone and beeswax. You make your way to a side chapel, the Contarelli Chapel, and then you see them. On the left wall is a painting, and it stops you in your tracks. It is The Calling of St. Matthew. This is a sacred story, the moment Jesus calls a tax collector to become one of his apostles. But what you see looks like a scene from a backroom tavern. A group of men are huddled around a table counting money. They are dressed not in ancient robes, but in the flamboyant silks and velvets of your own time. They are dandies, toughs, moneylenders. Their faces are hard, suspicious. This isn't Judea. This is Rome last night. Then you see the figures on the right, almost lost in the shadows. It is Christ, his face barely visible. He raises a hand and points, his gesture a direct quote of Michelangelo's Adam on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. But this is not the creation of man. It is the recreation of a sinner. A single, sharp, diagonal beam of light cuts through the darkness, following Christ's gesture. It slices across the wall, illuminating the dust motes in the air, and falls directly on the face of the tax collector, Matthew. Matthew is caught. His face is a mixture of confusion and shock. One hand is still on the pile of coins, the source of his worldly life. The other points to his own chest, as if to say, "Who? Me?" It is the precise, frozen moment of choice. The instant a life is shattered and remade by a sliver of divine light in a dark room. You have never seen anything like it. The barrier between the holy and the profane has been obliterated. The sacred has crashed into the real world. On the opposite wall, the story concludes with the martyrdom of St. Matthew. And here, there is no quiet tension. There is only chaos and violence. The saint is on the ground. His executioner, a near-naked brute, lunges over him, sword raised. Figures recoil in horror. A young acolyte screams. An angel reaches down from a cloud with the palm of martyrdom. The space is cramped, suffocating. The figures are pushed right into your face. You are not a spectator. You are a witness to an assassination. In the background, lurking in the shadows, is a self-portrait of the artist himself, Caravaggio, his face twisted in a look of anguish and perhaps complicity. He is watching his own violent nature play out on the canvas. The paintings are a sensation. People flock to the chapel. They are shocked. They are moved. They are horrified. Other artists are stunned. Here is a man who paints without idealization, who uses light not just to illuminate, but to dramatize. He has created a new language for art. Tenebrism, they will call it, a heightened, dramatic use of light and shadow. But for the people in the church, it is simply the language of truth. The success brings more commissions. He paints the conversion of St. Paul and the crucifixion of St. Peter for the Carrassi Chapel in Santa Maria del Popolo. Once again, he breaks every rule. In the conversion, the Apostle Paul lies on his back, blinded by the light of God. But the hero of the painting is not the saint, it's his horse. The massive, muscular rump of the animal dominates the canvas, its hoof held carefully so as not to step on its master. A stable boy looks on, uncomprehending. The divine event is treated as a stable accident. It is shockingly mundane, and therefore utterly believable. In the crucifixion of Peter, their faces are weathered, their hands are calloused. We see the strain in their backs, the dirt on their feet. This is not a glorious martyrdom. This is hard physical labor. The ugliness of the act makes the faith of the saint all the more powerful. Caravaggio becomes the most sought-after painter in Rome. But with fame comes scrutiny. And the very thing that makes his art so powerful, his unflinching realism, is also what gets him into trouble. He is commissioned to paint an altarpiece for the Contarelli Chapel, the piece that will tie his two other masterpieces together, the Inspiration of St. Matthew. He delivers the painting, and the church authorities reject it. Imagine their shock. The saint, the author of a gospel, is depicted as a bald, simple-minded peasant. He looks confused, illiterate. He slouches in his chair, his bare, dirty feet practically dangling out of the painting and over the altar. An angel, looking more like a pestering Roman street urchin, has to physically grab the saint's hand and guide it, as if teaching a child how to write. It is intimate, it is human, it is tender. And to the church fathers it is profoundly disrespectful. It is vulgar. Caravaggio is forced to paint it again. The second version, the one we see today, is more conventional. The saint is a dignified scholar. The angel dictates from a respectful distance. It is a masterpiece, but something of the raw human truth of the first version has been lost. The scandals keep coming. He paints a Madonna di Loreto, a depiction of the Virgin Mary appearing to two poor pilgrims. His model for the Holy Mother is a well-known Roman prostitute named Lina Antonietti, a woman who happens to be his lover. The pilgrims kneeling before her have wrinkled, careworn faces and filthy, calloused feet. He pushes their dirty souls right into the foreground, a gesture of both radical piety, honouring the poor, and stunning provocation. A notary, Mariano Pasqualone, who has a professional and personal interest in Lena, is incensed by the painting and by Caravaggio's relationship with her. The two men get into a vicious argument that ends with Caravaggio cracking the notary over the head with a weapon. Another arrest warrant is issued. But the ultimate scandal is his death of the Virgin. Commissioned for a church in Trastevere, it is meant to be a solemn, heartbreaking depiction of the apostles mourning the Mother of Christ. When he unveils the painting, a gasp of horror ripples through the patrons. The Virgin Mary is not shown ascending to heaven in a cloud of glory. She is a corpse. Her body is bloated, her feet are bare, her skin has a sickly greenish pallor. She looks, in fact, like a drowned woman. And according to his rivals and critics, that is exactly what she is. The story spreads like wildfire that Caravaggio used as his model the body of a prostitute fished out of the river Tiber. Mary Magdalene weeps beside the body, her head buried in her hands, her grief raw and private. The apostles are huddled in the shadows, looking less like saints and more like broken old men, their faces contorted with a grief that is all too human. There is no divine light, no angels, only a single, vast red curtain hanging over the scene like a shroud of blood. The painting is rejected. It is deemed utterly indecent, an affront to the Mother of God. It is removed from the church. This is the central conflict of Caravaggio's life. His genius is to see the sacred in the gutter, to find Christ among the whores and tax collectors, to see saints with dirty feet and a Virgin Mary who looks like a dead girl from the streets. He paints a truth so profound it feels like a punch to the gut. But Rome, for all its sins, is not always ready for that kind of truth. His personal life is now in a free fall. The brawling is incessant. He is sued for libel by another painter. He wounds a corporal of the city guard. He is arrested for throwing stones at his landlady's window. He is protected by his powerful patrons, Cardinal Del Monte, the Marchese Giustiniani, the Borghese family, who get him out of jail, pay his fines, and smooth things over. They protect their investment. But they are protecting a man who is becoming more and more uncontrollable. The same hand that can render a look of divine ecstasy with a brush stroke can just as easily draw a sword in a drunken rage. The tension between the sacred artist and the violent sinner is stretched to its breaking point. And on that hot May evening in 1606, on a tennis court in the Campo Marzio, it finally snaps. The world of Roman tennis in the 17th century was not a place of polite applause and white shorts. It was a gambling sport, fast and brutal, played by toughs and aristocrats alike. It was a stage for rivalries, and the rivalry between Caravaggio and Ranuccio Tomassoni was a bitter one. Tomassoni was a man from a good family, but he had a reputation. He was a pimp, the head of a small gang, a man you didn't cross. He and Caravaggio had clashed before. The source of their hatred is lost to history, buried in the conflicting reports and rumours of the time. Some say it was a 10 scudo wager on the tennis match that went sour. Some say it was a long-standing feud over a woman, the same Lina Antonietti, the prostitute who modelled for the Madonna and was desired by so many men. Or perhaps it was simpler than that. Perhaps it was just two proud, violent men who saw in each other a reflection of their own worst instincts. On May 28th, the challenge was made. A game of palacorda. Caravaggio arrived with his seconds, including his old friend Onorio Longhi. Tomassoni was there with his own men. The game began. The thud of the ball, the shouts of the players. But the real contest wasn't happening on the court. It was in the glares, the insults muttered under the breath. The argument, when it finally erupted, was swift and decisive. A dispute over a point, a shove, and then the swords were out. Imagine the scene, not a choreographed movie duel, but a desperate, ugly scramble in the dust. Caravaggio was a skilled swordsman, but this was a brawl, 4 against 4. Tomassoni lunged. Caravaggio, intending to wound and humiliate his rival, aimed a low blow, a common move in street fights, meant to castrate. But his blade went too high, or Tomassoni twisted at the last second. The sharp steel sliced into his thigh, severing the femoral artery. It was a catastrophic wound. The fight stopped instantly. The sight of the blood, gushing uncontrollably, sobered everyone. Tomassoni collapsed. His friends rushed to him, trying to staunch the flow, but it was hopeless. He was bleeding to death in the dirt of the tennis court. Caravaggio, wounded in the head, knew his life was over. Not his physical life, but his life in Rome. This was not a brawl he could walk away from. He had killed a man from a well-connected family. His powerful patrons could protect him from a charge of assault, but not from murder. A bando capital would be issued against him, a capital sentence. He was now an outlaw. Anyone in the Papal States could kill him on sight and present his head for a reward. He ran. He fled south to the estates of the powerful Colonna family who had known his mother. They hid him, sheltered him from the papal police who were already swarming the city, searching for the celebrity killer. From his hiding place, he could look back toward Rome, the city that had made him and that he had just lost forever. Everything he had worked for, the fame, the commissions, the prestige, was gone, washed away in a pool of blood on a tennis court. He was 34 years old. He would never see Rome again. The fugitive's journey began. It would take him to the teeming port of Naples, to the island fortress of Malta, to the rugged shores of Sicily, and finally, to a lonely, fever-haunted beach. He was no longer just a painter. He was a hunted man, and the darkness he had so masterfully controlled on canvas now threatened to swallow him whole. Naples in 1606 was a Spanish territory, a city outside the reach of the Pope's justice. It was a loud, chaotic and dangerous port, a perfect refuge for a man on the run. Caravaggio arrived and within months became the city's artistic superstar. News of his crime had preceded him, but in Naples this only added to his mystique. He was the killer genius from Rome. The commissions poured in. But the paintings he produced here are different. The shadows are deeper, the light more desperate. The violence that was always present in his work is now raw, visceral. He paints the 7 works of mercy, a sprawling, chaotic nocturnal scene where angels and saints mingle with the city's poor in a cramped alleyway. He paints the flagellation of Christ, where Christ's body, bathed in a cruel, raking light, seems to crumple under the blows of his tormentors. He paints Salome with the head of John the Baptist and gives the severed head on the platter his own features. He is the martyr, the victim, the sinner awaiting justice. His art becomes a confession. But Naples is too close to Rome. He is still a man with a price on his head. He needs a more powerful form of protection, a pardon that can wash away his sins. And he conceives of a daring plan. He will travel to the island of Malta, the headquarters of the legendary Knights of St. John. The Knights were a sovereign military order, the last crusaders, the defenders of Christendom. To become a Knight of Justice was the highest honor, a rank reserved for the European aristocracy. But there was another way in, to become a Knight of Magistral Grace, an honor bestowed for outstanding service to the order. If Caravaggio, the murderer, could become a holy warrior, a Knight of Malta, surely the Pope would have to grant him a pardon. He arrived in Malta in 1607 and was welcomed by the Grand Master Alof de Wignacourt. Wignacourt was a shrewd man. He saw the propaganda value in having the most famous painter in Italy as his personal artist. Caravaggio set to work, painting a stunning portrait of the Grand Master, proud and armoured. And then he was given the most important commission of his life, a massive altarpiece for the co-cathedral of St. John in Valletta. The painting he created is his largest and arguably his greatest masterpiece, the beheading of St. John the Baptist. It is a work of horrifying silence and stillness. The scene is a grim prison courtyard. The executioner has already slit John's throat. He now draws a knife to finish the gruesome task of severing the head. Salome waits with a golden platter. An old woman, a witness, clasps her head in a silent scream of horror. 2 prisoners watch from a barred window, their faces lost in the gloom. Unlike his earlier works, there is no dramatic shaft of divine light. The light is a flat, unforgiving, workaday light. This is not a holy event. It is a squalid execution. And in the blood pouring from John the Baptist's neck, Caravaggio signs his name. F. Michelangelo. F for Fra or brother. He is signing it as a member of the order. In July of 1608, in a grand ceremony in that very same cathedral, the murderer Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio was inducted into the sacred brotherhood. The street brawler was now Fra Michelangelo, a knight of St. John. He had achieved the impossible. His pardon seemed within reach. It lasted for 1 month. The old demons would not be silenced. In August, just weeks after his investiture, Caravaggio was involved in another brawl, this time with a more senior knight. The details are murky, but the outcome was not. He was arrested and thrown into the dungeons of Fort St. Angelo, a fortress carved out of solid rock. But Caravaggio was not a man to be caged. Somehow, in a feat of astonishing daring, he escaped the inescapable prison and fled the island under cover of darkness. The knights, humiliated, moved swiftly. In a formal ceremony held in front of his own masterpiece in the cathedral, he was publicly expelled from the order. He was described as a foul and rotten member and cast out. He was a fugitive once more. He fled to Sicily, island hopping from Syracuse to Messina to Palermo, always looking over his shoulder. The Knights of Malta were powerful, with spies everywhere. His paranoia grew. Friends said he slept fully armed, that he would fly into a rage at the slightest criticism of his work. He became erratic, unpredictable. He was a man coming apart. Yet he continued to paint, producing works of heartbreaking, desolate beauty. His burial of St. Lucy and the raising of Lazarus are vast, dark canvases where the human figures seem dwarfed by oppressive, empty space. They are paintings about death and the faintest, most desperate glimmer of hope. He was painting for his life, sending works back to Rome as offerings, hoping to buy his forgiveness from powerful figures like Cardinal Scipione Borghese, the Pope's nephew. After nearly a year in Sicily, he heard encouraging news. His powerful friends in Rome were making progress. A pardon was being negotiated. He decided to gamble everything. He returned to Naples, closer to Rome, to await the final word. But his enemies had not forgotten him. One evening, as he left a tavern called the Osteria del Ceriglio, he was ambushed. A group of men, perhaps sent by the knight he had assaulted in Malta, or perhaps by some other enemy from his violent past, attacked him in the dark. They did not try to kill him. They did something worse. They slashed his face with daggers, leaving him horrifically disfigured. For a painter whose entire art was based on the unflinching observation of the human face, it was the cruelest possible punishment. News reached Rome that the famous Caravaggio was dead. The reports were premature, but the man who survived the attack was a broken one. And then, in the summer of 1610, the news he had been praying for finally arrived. His pardon had been granted. Cardinal Borghese had secured it from the Pope. He was free to return to Rome. He quickly gathered his last possessions, including 3 paintings he intended as a peace offering for the cardinal, and boarded a ship, a small coastal vessel called a felucca, heading north. His exile was over. The ship docked at a small port called Palo, where he disembarked briefly. But when he tried to reboard, something went terribly wrong. The Spanish guards in charge of the port, perhaps mistaking him for another fugitive, arrested him. He was thrown into a local jail. By the time he was released, 2 days later, frantic and furious, the felucca, with all his paintings, all his belongings, had sailed without him. His pardon was waiting for him in Rome. His paintings were on that ship. He was stranded, penniless, and alone. In the crushing heat of a Tuscan July, he began to walk, then run up the coastline, trying to catch the boat at its next port of call, a place called Porto Ercole. Imagine him, a man with a scarred face, burning with fever, perhaps from an infection, perhaps a return of his old malaria, staggering along the desolate, swampy coastline under a merciless sun. The same sun that created the brilliant, harsh light in his paintings was now his tormentor. He reached Porto Ercole, but the ship was not there. It had sailed on. Everything was lost. He collapsed on the beach. He was taken to a local infirmary where, for several days, he burned with a violent fever. On July 18, 1610, Michelangelo Merisi da Caravaggio died. He was 38 years old. His pardon, it is said, arrived in Porto Ercole 3 days later. He was likely buried in an unmarked pauper's grave. No grand tomb for the most famous painter of his age. He simply vanished like a figure stepping back into the deepest shadows of one of his own canvases. But his light could not be extinguished. In the years after his death, a generation of artists across Europe, the Caravaggisti, would embrace his revolutionary style. They would copy his dramatic lighting, his gritty realism, his ability to capture a single, heart-stopping moment of human drama. From Spain to the Netherlands, painters like Ribera, Gentileschi, de la Tour, and even the young Rembrandt would learn from the man who painted saints with dirty feet. He changed the course of art forever. And what of the man himself? He lived a life of shocking contradictions. A man of faith who painted with a brutal secular honesty. A genius who sought grace on the canvas while living a life of violence and sin. He painted the darkness in the human soul because he knew it intimately. He knew the fear, the rage, the desperation, but he also knew the power of light. In his paintings, the light is never gentle. It is a force. It is an intrusion. It is revelation, judgment, and sometimes, just sometimes, it is grace appearing in the darkest of places. We are left with the paintings and with the haunting story of a life lived without compromise. Did he, in his final feverish moments on that lonely beach, find the peace he could never achieve in life? Did he see a final, cleansing light piercing the shadows? Or did he simply die as he had lived, in a storm of his own making? The paintings offer no easy answers. They just hold out a silent, eternal invitation to look past the ideal and the beautiful, and to find the divine in the damaged, the human, the real. The shadows in his paintings still hold secrets. If the story of this light and this darkness has held you, there are more mysteries waiting to be explored. Subscribe, and we will find them together.